Now, Democratic strategists say black voters will be crucial for winning the White House and local elections come November. And that includes our CBS News political analyst Antjuan Seawright. In an op-ed for The Hill, he argues every generation in the black community will be critical for victory, adding that some strategy, though, will need to be developed to secure their support. What does he mean by that? Well, we've got Antjuan with us now to discuss all of this. Antjuan, always great to see you. You know, my assumption was that black voters are crucial in every election, particularly for the Democratic Party. But explain to us why that's so accentuated now.
You know, before this presidential election cycle started, I said several things. One, I said the road to heaven and the White House runs through South Carolina. I also said you cannot be the Democratic nominee without strong, deep, and wide support from the most loyal constituency in a generation, and that's African-American voters. Joe Biden demonstrated that black people was going to decide who our nominee was going to be, and voila, he's a nominee. Now, I am also saying we as Democrats will not be able to take back that temporary public housing unit at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue called the White House without strong, deep, wide, and broad support among the political concrete of this Democratic Party, and that's African-American voters. Without African-American voters, Doug Jones would not be the U.S. Senator from the state of Alabama. Barack Obama would have never become the first African-American leader of the free world, and we would not have the most diverse and fragile majority in our nation's history if black voters did not show up and down ballots all across this country in the most consequential midterm election of my lifetime, the 2018 midterms.
But here's the issue, as you note, that during the South Carolina, primaries for the Democratic nomination, it was really black voters who propelled the former vice president back into front-runner status. But there is a divide as far as policy desires from baby boomers to millennials and Gen Z. So another thing that you point to is that young black voters will be crucial to a Biden win. How does that translate to policy proposals, considering some of the most liberal and progressive proposals these days are being described as, in a phrase, as defund the police, which some view as alienating the more moderates and older folks?
Well, what I will remind people, Errol, is that elections are about coalitions and constituencies. And when we talk about the collective black vote, within the collective black vote, there are constituencies made up of African-American voters, young voters, more seasoned voters. I do not like using the word old. My mother would get upset with me. And then you have young voters. Now, as I wrote in my op-ed piece, I can't keep up with the alphabet soup between generation X, Y, Z, or 1, 2, 3. What I do know is that great hip-hop philosopher, 2 Chainz, said it best when he says, we need each and every one of them. That means, for translation, each and every one of the constituencies that make up the collective black vote, and young voters will not only set a tone for this election, but for elections to come. And so while they may not be 100% on board with the way Joe Biden articulates his support for the same issues they advocate for, it's a friendly reminder that while Joe Biden may be one messenger, there are other messengers who can articulate a message that may translate different or translate in such a way that it connects with younger voters. And that's why I believe in the old Southern philosophy that it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to win elections. And so Joe Biden and the Biden campaign is going to have to give some surrogates their political deployment papers and use them in this election to connect with certain constituencies that he may not connect with on the surface.
How, though, do you propose or do you identify that the former vice president is doing that? Because one statistic you point to in your piece shows that voter turnout among black millennials decreased from 2012 and 2016 by more than 4%. So what is Joe Biden doing now that Hillary Clinton didn't do 4 years ago?
Well, I think he's blocking and tackling in a different way. And I think the vice president is very sober about some of the challenges he may face as a candidate. But that's why you've seen him extend the right hand of fellowship, as we say in the AME church, to AOC, to Bernie Sanders, and to those who may connect with younger voters or different constituencies than in a different way than he may. And I commend him for that. I commend them for wanting to be a part of the team that will help save this country. At the end of the day, I think young black voters want the same thing older black voters want. I think young white voters want the same thing as middle-aged white voters want. And that's a better quality of life for their children, for their grandchildren, and for themselves. How we discuss that and how we talk about that will vary from person to person, from conversation to conversation. But in the end, we all have to be sober around this one simple fact. You cannot govern if you do not win. So all the things that we want for our future, all the things we want for our now, that will be determined by whether we win or not in November. And showing up to vote for Joe Biden will, I think, give us a rocket launch into having our say around these issues that we care about so much.
But I want to know what you make of what appears to be somewhat of a weakness when it comes to Joe Biden and millennials. There was a recent poll conducted by the Democracy Fund and UCLA Nationscape Project suggesting younger black voters just aren't as enthusiastic about voting for Joe Biden. According to that survey, 28% of 18 to 29-year-olds had a very favorable impression of him, compared to 72% of those 65 and up. So I get what you're saying as far as, look, black voters will ultimately coalesce around a guy who can win. But what's with the enthusiasm gap?
Well, I think that, one, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think for Joe Biden in particular, direction is far more important than speed. I think he's made some tremendous improvements with this particular voting bloc from the time he started the primary nomination process to where we are now. Thankfully, we still have some time to go, and we're starting to see people pay attention more and people lean in on more about the urgency around this election. Now, what Biden or any other Democratic candidate cannot afford to do is to take any constituency for granted, particularly strong voting blocs like young black voters who can make or break any election. So while there may be some challenges now, in the words of Mike Tyson, I think the key for Joe Biden is peaking at the right time. I've seen him peak at the right time on many occasions when it comes to many things. I don't see him not peaking with young African-American voters at the right time come this election. There are many things going on in our lives. While I may not be in the 18 to 29 age bracket, I'm 35. And so I'm young. I think I'm still vibrant. I think I'm still paying attention to this election. But a lot of my friends do not pay attention in the same way at the same level as I do. I am not out to lunch about that. But what I have encouraged them is to slowly start to get into the mind frame about the importance of this election. Start having the conversations. Start to get your questions answered. And by the time we get to November, it's time to really focus on getting yourself and others to the ballot box.
All right. Well, Antjuan Seawright, taking us from 2 Chainz to church to Mike Tyson. Only you give us that style of analysis. I really appreciate your time today.
I try to do my part, Errol.
And you're doing it. Thanks for your time, Antjuan. Appreciate it.